Hello and welcome to Top Story. Today, this week's summit in Pyongyang between President Roh Moo-hyun of South Korea, and Kim Il-jong of North Korea. The meeting is to last 3 days. Expectations, though, are low. It's only the second summit between the two sides since the end of the Korean War in 1953. 7 years ago, South Korean President Kim Dae-jung travelled north on a wave of euphoria. But it wasn't to last long. Kim Jong-il has never made his promised visit to the South Korean capital Seoul and has used the intervening 7 years to develop North Korea's own nuclear weapons program. No's aims are modest: to reduce tensions on the Korean peninsula, deepen cooperation and pave the way for a formal treaty ending at last the war of 1950 to 1953. In Washington, though, there is concern that No may make too many concessions. He's nearing the end of his term in office and wants to be remembered as a peacemaker. The fear is that if the South gives too much, Kim will have no incentive to disable his nuclear program. Well, joining me now to discuss the summit is Olivier Guillard, Director of Asian Research at the Institute for International and Strategic Relations here in Paris. Thanks very much for being on Top Story. The news we've had at the moment is that Kim has asked the South Korean delegation to stay on for another 24 hours. Is that a good sign?
It seems to be a good sign. It's pretty rare that a North Korean delegation asks South Korean or another one to stay longer. They're more used to break earlier the summit. Yeah, this is a positive sign, and I guess now that the international community is probably looking at that last news with a very interesting view. It's definitely a positive sign.
A good sign, you say, but up until now, expectations of this summit have been pretty low, haven't they?
They've been low. They've been low by the Western standards. You know, from the South Korean standard, it's a very important meeting. Only the second in the last half century. Imagine, this is a very important meeting. By the way, we are in South Korea, as you know, in a political election period. By the end of December, there will take place a presidential election, and so this summit, this very rare summit, is seen with a very precious and very serious eyes in the south. In the north, in this North Korean country, the expectations are pretty high as well. As we know, China, Japan, Russia, and specifically the United States, they are looking at this summit with very different eyes, because they don't want the situation to get worse, of course not, but they don't want the things to go too quickly. So they want to keep in touch, they want to try to still manage part of this process. This is a bilateral process, by the way.
But even in South Korea, expectations seem to be lower, for instance, than they were at the time of the last summit in 2000. Or there was that euphoric feeling, you know, the first big summit and the sunshine policy that followed it, but it doesn't seem to have produced very many results. We've just had roads built, railway built, but only one rail crossing since 2000. Kim hasn't been to Seoul as he promised. So expectations in South Korea among South Koreans seem to be a little bit low this time. They're getting a bit frustrated, aren't they?
Let's say that they are reasonably low, but it remains a very strong commitment to do something to reunify the whole Korean peninsula. So when you speak with the South Korean public opinion, they are still willing to do something towards the north, even if they have the feeling that they give too much and they don't get many things in return. But expectation is not that low. There is a strong commitment, by the way.
No says he doesn't want to raise the issue of North Korea's nuclear weapons program during these talks. I mean, isn't he in danger of giving away too much to North Korea, of not pushing them hard enough?
I don't think so. I think that the South Korean philosophy is to dissecate the problems. The proliferation problem has to be dealt separately. This is a multilateral process. The inter-Korean reunification process is a bilateral process, and in a way to advance, to pave the way for an improvement of the situation regionally, they have to deal separately. The bilateral process is between Seoul and Pyongyang, and they are not willing to discuss nuclear issues, because this is the core issue, and this is the way where the international community is not ready to see too many concessions and they want to get results immediately. The bilateral process has to be really disconnected from this perspective.
Olivier, you say that the suggestion that Kim wants to give an extra 24 hours to these talks is probably a good sign, but what sort of things, what sort of positives would you might expect or hope to come out of this summit?
We must not have too high expectations, for sure not. 50 years of very difficult times, of very long and difficult issues cannot be dealt only in 24 hours, for sure not. But let's interpret this in the sense that the North is probably more committed today to discuss seriously with the South. We know for sure that the South is really deeply engaged with the North, and they are willing to show and to provide economic assistance, to discuss eventually a joint economic community that would be a prelude to a reunification that would take place a bit later. But I think that Mr. Roh, the South Korean president, has many things in his pocket. What we do not know so far is what Mr. Kim Jong-il, the North Korean leader, has in his pocket and what he is willing to share with his counterparts from South Korea.
Well, there has been a lot of talk of a big aid package from South Korea, even as much as 20 billion was one suggestion. Do you think that's going to happen?
This is probably what the South Korea is willing to provide, to assist, in a way to make sure that the North remains committed to a peace process, to reunification. And it's a very large amount of money. Specifically, if we consider the standard of living in the North. Probably that the United States, they will probably ask Seoul not to be that generous so quickly, so fast. They are expecting more in return immediately before than providing such a huge amount of money. So I guess that a lot of pressure will get down on the South Korean shoulders, not to provide too quickly.
Too much too soon.
Yeah.
But what would South Korea want in return? What sort of thing can North Korea give the South at this stage?
Probably only one thing, to be sure that the North is really committed to a process of discussion, eventually reunification, but to be sure that they share now in the very short term, short to medium term, the very same philosophy of peace process and discussion very seriously, basically. Mr. Roh is only willing to be sure that his counterpart, Mr. Kim Jong-il, is really willing to show his sincere commitment, and there's nothing hidden under the table.
OK, we're going to have to end it there. That's all we have time for today. Thanks to Olivier Guillard of the Institute for Strategic and International Research here in Paris. Join us again tomorrow for another edition of Top Story. Goodbye.